Wow, I just finished an interview with Kay Warren, the co-founder of mega church Saddleback in California, and my mind is blown. I had no idea about her childhood, her sexual molestation. I had no idea about her emotional attachment with somebody other than Rick Warren, her struggles within their marriage and how quickly they got married. This interview, this conversation with Kay will encourage you. It actually shook me, inspired me, and challenged me being somebody in the public eye and how to really maintain your privacy and integrity, and always remembering that it's the end in mind in all the choices you make. You won't want to miss this show. Well, Kay Warren, it is great to have you on my show, Your Stories, Melinda. It's great to see you again after a few years.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, well, I think the last time I saw you, we were together while you were promoting your last book, Choose Joy. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot's happened between both of us in our own personal lives since then. But it's great to have you on the show as we talk about your new book that we'll talk about later on in the interview. But it'll be great to get to know you as a woman, as a sister, in the first part of the show. So here's the thing. I know a lot of my viewers and listeners know you as the co-founder of Saddleback Church with your husband, Rick, and the founder of the Saddleback's HIV and AIDS initiative. They've read your books. And so they know you in that role or roles, Kay, but they don't know you as all the other things that you have dealt with and in your childhood. So let's just get to know each other that way. I think that's the power of story, which is my heart, to hear one another's story and then learn and kind of glean those sort of nuggets of gold from one another. So let's start way back. So I don't know if you ever would thought and dreamed that you'd be here at your stage and age. I don't know. But what was your growing up like as you sort of began your life?
Yeah, well, my dad was a pastor, so I grew up in a ministry home. That's really the only life I know, because my dad was a pastor, and then I married a pastor. So I don't know what normal life is. I just, I know a ministry home. But I grew up in San Diego, California, and my dad was pastor of small churches, and I have a younger brother who's 8 years younger. So for the first 8 years of my life, it was just me. I was an only child till I was 8. I often say that's why I talk to myself so much. Because for the first 8 years of my life, there was nobody else to talk to. So I carried on that habit of talking to myself a lot. But so it was a small family. We were small churches in kind of a big city. So we weren't really well known. We could leave our house, and, San Diego's a big place. And so it wasn't like people knew us. And so it was kind of, insulated, very conservative Christian home. As I look back now, I just kind of put the emphasis on very conservative. But my parents were good. They lived out. I mean, we had stuff like everybody else, but they lived out their faith. So it's kind of set me up for never really having a crisis of faith. It wasn't like I thought, I don't ever want to be in ministry. I want to get away from this as fast as I can. I really saw my parents as people who loved Jesus, who had integrity. They were the same at home as they were, at out in public. And I wanted to be a missionary. So when I was 9 years old, because we lived in San Diego, and it was right after the Korean War, and I'm really old. I'm like old as dirt. But there were a lot of Japanese. There were men who had married Japanese women when they were in the service, and so then there was a large population in San Diego of servicemen who had married Japanese women. So in our church, there were a lot of those folks, and I then wanted to be a missionary to Japan. That's where Japan came in. Okay. So I spent most of my life wanting to be a missionary to Japan. So I never thought I'd be a pastor's wife. I thought I would be a missionary. And then how far do you want me to go? I mean,
just a story, the background of you. So, yeah.
I was really young. Yep, I was really young. I was molested by the son of our church janitor. And I was like 5 or 6, young enough to be very aware of what was happening, but also young enough and frightened enough to not have any words or language for it. And so I never told anybody. I didn't tell my parents, and it just became this it became this thing that stayed inside of me and created both repulsion around sexuality and fascination. And that definitely affected me, as I grew. And you may want to come back to that at some point. So then other than that, I had low levels of depression. I didn't know that that's what it was. I didn't have words again for depression. I didn't even know what that word was. And if I had, I would have instantly dismissed it because I was a Christian, and Christians don't get depressed, whatever depressed is.
Yeah, and Kay, when I went through my depression, I remember there are people that said, that's impossible because you have the Holy Spirit in you. How can you be depressed? I'm like, exactly. No, I'm depressed.
Yeah.
And I don't need your guilt or your things on me because I have enough on me. Right?
Enough of a weight that I'm carrying here.
Right.
That.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that I had depression. or anxiety. I just knew that if I had, a date or, as a teenager, and I might spend days before that ruminating, just thinking in my mind a scenario. Okay, so first we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. And then I would hit like the rewind button in my head, play that whole scenario, and I could stay awake all night long with these ruminating thoughts. I didn't know that was kind of like anxiety.
Wow.
I didn't know. It was just what I was living. So I went to, got through high school, went to a Christian college, and a small Christian college in Southern California, met this wild and crazy guy named Rick Warren. I was not interested. He was way too loud, way too exuberant. He was just way too much.
Yeah.
Everything about him was too much. I thought he was an amazing Christian, and he was a leader in our little Christian college. But for me, he was just too much. But then I dated his friend for a while.
Oh, interesting.
Thought his friend was who I was going to marry.
Oh.
Only his friend didn't share that opinion. Broke my heart. And in that space then of in my broken heart, Rick moved in.
Oh, so Rick was second.
He was because we were friends.
Yeah.
But like I said, he was just way too much. He was just way too much. I was shy and quiet.
And he's like, yes.
And I thought I needed somebody who was very gentle and meek. Yeah. And So
my husband is like you, okay, and then I'm like Rick, because that's exactly what he would say. It's like this. That's exactly okay. Right. I'm tracking. I get it.
I didn't know that I needed Tigger in my life, but I really did need Tigger.
Yes.
So through a long story, we went out on one date. 8 days later, he asked me to marry him.
8?
8 days. And what's even more remarkable is I said yes.
After 8 days.
Yes.
Did you really know, or was it just, that's
it was
quick.
The first time. It was the first time I ever felt like I heard God speak to me.
Wow.
So he's taken me out on a date. We come back because we're Christian college students, so you pray at the end of the date. So
of course.
And of course. And it's quiet, and in the quiet he says, "I love you." And I'm like, "What? What did you say?" He said, I love you. Will you marry me? And really, wow. I was shocked into silence. But I sent up this prayer to God and was like, what in the boy is crazy. What in the world? I don't love him. But I felt like God said, say yes, and I'll bring the feelings.
Wow.
I'm 19, and in my understanding of God and his will and love and romance, I said yes. So we got engaged and had a very tumultuous courtship, as you can imagine, because, it didn't go the way I told my kids to date toward marriage, with getting to know each other, know the good, the bad, the ugly, talk about no, none of that happened.
And Kay, you're also bringing in, as just an aside, so as you shared before, so, you're molested as a child, and then you have depression, and all of that stuff can follow you as you go about life. And so, as you're going into that, I'm assuming that there were those sort of trails of things that were brought into the relationship.
Well, they were, but I just didn't know.
But you didn't know.
Yeah,
right.
Because after I was molested, it kind of got buried in my mind.
Right, yeah.
I didn't think about it. I didn't know about it. I wouldn't have even said it had happened. But when I was about 19, that memory came back. I mean, in a flood. I was sitting in a class in college, taking a class. Probably, I think it was a psychology class. And something triggered that memory. And as I'm sitting in this class, I had the full-blown memory of what had happened to me.
Wow.
And I mean, I didn't even know what to do with it. I did not even know what to do with it because it had been buried for so many years. But I didn't really have any feelings about it. So when Rick and I got engaged and it got closer to getting married and I told him about it, I was unemotional. It was just more like, hey, this happened. I didn't tell him about some of the other things that had happened, like that repulsion and attraction around sexuality. My dad had this, it's pretty funny now. Remember I said very conservative Christian home. So, but my dad had this shelf in our living room of books, and he had Masters and Johnson, their studies. I mean, he had why he had those books out there and didn't expect his children to actually find them. I don't know, but I did, and I read them, completely guilted out, ashamed of myself for being interested. Again, my family didn't talk about sex. We just didn't really talk about it. I got my whole sex education with the little golden book of knowledge, with my parents pointing out flowers and bees, and I was supposed to somehow understand that had to do with human sexuality. It was really kind of a mess. So
yeah, I got the book too. It's the big, I think, 1970s book where the two are like this, two humps, and then all of a sudden they become one hump on top of each other under a blanket, and then all of a sudden she's pregnant.
You got explicit information. I got literal birds and bees.
Oh, no, she really did, eh?
I did.
Wow.
I did. And so when I look back with compassion on my younger self, I see all the things that kind of set me up for failure in my marriage. Those would be some of those factors. So when Rick and I got married, we didn't know each other. He had moved to Japan to be a short-term missionary. I moved to Alabama to do short-term missions. We came back to the States, lived in different parts of California. And so when we got married, we were total strangers. So nothing worked then when we got married. Nothing. Sex didn't work. We didn't know how to communicate. We didn't understand how to do conflict. I was, he was the run from conflict kind of person, even though he was so outgoing. He was like, we're going this way if there's conflict. I'm not. Don't want to deal with it. And me, I'm like, pursuing him with all I've got, trying to get him to talk to me. And the further I pursued, the more he ran. And so within a very short time, we were in marital hell. It was awful. And we kept thinking to ourselves, wait a minute. I saved myself for this? Somebody has lied to me, because they always told me, if you are a virgin when you get married, man, your life is going to be awesome. And we were virgins and our life was horrible. And so there was just a lot of stuff in our early 20s.
Now, did you have anybody you could talk to about that?
No,
that's it. I hear that a lot.
It was the mid-70s, and Christians, first of all, didn't have problems.
Right. Yes, that's true.
Every problem could be solved if you just love Jesus more and better, if you just confessed sin, if you just read a few more Bible verses. It would fix everything. And we tried that, and it didn't fix anything, and we were miserable. And here we were loving Jesus with all of our hearts, both of us now wanting to go on the mission field. We weren't looking at pastoring, we were looking still at the mission field. And we just couldn't reconcile all this brokenness and there was nobody to talk to. Nobody.
Kay, I wonder, because, when I went through a very difficult divorce a number of years ago, 8 years ago, I'm in ministry. I'm in Christian ministry on television. We're leading Bible studies. We're part of the church. And even then, we kept it hidden. Like all of the marital issues, because there's this thing as Christians and as in the public eye that you cannot share, because then you're exposed, and then what are people going to think, and you're supposed to be the example. And now that I look back, I mean, it was the worst time. You're isolated. We didn't deal with conflict well, and I was disappointed because I got married later, like 32 years old, waiting for the right guy. And when that happened, well, that sure wasn't. The marriage was not what I thought it was going to be. No. So I absolutely get that, because you're trying to hide everything, and yet everything was imploding and no one knew. So when we ended, everybody was shocked. Most people were shocked. They're like, there is no way. I'm like, yeah. And he left. My my husband left. And so picking up those pieces. But I totally get that, because you're in this marital conflict and you're not telling anybody. So you're trying to deal with it, with the two of you, and that's not working.
Well, we had this sort of fairy tale story of how we got together. It sounds so romantic.
Yeah.
You get engaged after your first date. 8 that just sounds so fairy tale-ish. But so they would say things to us like, we came back from our honeymoon and it's like, so how was your honeymoon? Did you guys have a great time? And we were like, yeah. When really we were in agony. We were in agony. We were young and in a culture, Christian culture, in which, you couldn't talk. We felt like we couldn't talk about it. We didn't know what to say. We didn't know how to tell anybody that the fairy tale was really a nightmare.
Yeah.
And after a couple of years, we went to Christian counseling. But I mean, we went with shame.
Really,
we went to Christian counseling full of shame that we were failures, that we couldn't make it work, and that we were failures as Christians, we were failures as married people, failures as ministers. And thank God there was the most wonderful Christian man who gave us counsel, who's taught us how to start talking to each other, because we didn't even know how to communicate about our problems.
Yeah.
We literally didn't know how to talk to each other about our problems. And he launched us on, kind of the road to building a strong marriage. And I'm so glad I stayed with Rick. Lots of people would have divorced, through the years, because those struggles just didn't instantly melt away. It took a long time for us to build a strong and stable marriage. But I mean, June, coming up, we'll be married 42 years.
Wow. Congratulations.
I'm grateful.
Woo!
I know. I'm so grateful. But then there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears spilt on the ground, to get to that place.
Okay, it's so good to hear that. I mean, as someone, and now I just got remarried October 2016 to an amazing man who is completely different than what I ever thought would be good for me. Yeah. And yet God had a totally different agenda. Because I'm like, because I said, I don't want to marry a minister. I don't want to marry a worship leader because they're flaky. I don't want to marry a guy with kids because I don't have kids. I'm not even kidding you. And then all of a sudden, here I am, stepmom, worship leader, former minister, theologian. I'm like, oh my goodness. And yet it works really beautifully. So clearly my taste in things wasn't working. God's was. In the marital conflict, I know you do mention this, and this has come up because I think this is important for women about this emotional attachment. Because I think that you have to guard that. As I was reading through your things, Kay, I'll be honest, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I think I had those. Yeah. I think I might have had one or two. And if I actually polled my girlfriends who are in ministry and in leadership, I would say most would say yes. That's a big one.
Attachment to somebody else besides your husband. Yeah.
And I don't think people like to talk about that. And I think people don't.
Scary.
Yeah, and I don't think people want to talk and maybe not think it's so bad because it's not a sexual affair. Like we didn't have sex with them. We just sort of like connected with them heart to heart, right? Talk to me a little bit about that, because I know there are people there right now, and there are people that are right at that cusp, and people who like me who are like, wow, I have been there, and I want to make sure I guard myself going forward.
Yeah. Well, this was, we've been married, I think maybe 2.5 years, and Rick was in seminary, and I was working, I was the main support for our family while he went to get his master's, and we were just so unhappy. Nothing was really working very well. We'd started counseling for a little bit, and so we were starting to make progress, but still our marriage was very, very rocky. And so at the place where I worked, I was a receptionist, and so the elevator to our suite was right in front of my desk. And I hadn't been there a few days before this gorgeous hunk of manhood walked out of that elevator in front of me. And I was I was a 14-year-old schoolgirl again. My heart just kind of went, kapunk. And I just thought, he is gorgeous. Mm-hmm. He is just so good looking. And so I didn't really mean to, but I just started like watching him in the office, and I made sure that I could maybe walk by his little office and say hello, as I walked past, or that I timed my lunch so that maybe we were in the lunchroom at the same time. And I don't know. I just started this flirtatious thing of where I started focusing on him. And then I started daydreaming. I started daydreaming of what it would be like to sit down and have a real conversation. What would it be like to go on a meal with him? What would it be like if he kissed me? My fantasy started growing way out of line, way out of proportion. And I started building this fantasy life around this guy. And I remember one day I walked by his office and he was talking to his wife, I think, on the phone. And I overheard him just being he was mad at her, and he was using language, and he was just being mean to her. And it's like somebody took a pin and just went boop, and the bubble popped, because I saw that he might have been as good looking as they come, but he was not a nice man. Mm-hmm. He treated his wife terribly. And it was so disillusioning to me, because I had this guy build up in my head as, he was just gorgeous and incredible and, Mr. Wonderful. And then I saw him as the real person that he was. And I am just so grateful, because I don't know what would have happened. What if he had noticed this silly little young woman who was, kind of following him around? What if he had noticed that and responded back to me? I was putting my marriage in jeopardy. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, it ended before anything happened, before, he noticed my attention and my fascination with him. But what if he had? I put myself in that place I would have had to made a decision. Am I going to pursue a relationship beyond this emotional attachment? Am I going to sit down and have coffee with him? Am I going to go where else that might lead? Or am I going to stay in my marriage attached to my husband, even though we are miserable at the moment?
Wow.
And so it's like what I say in my book is that even though we didn't know how to love each other well, our marriage vows didn't become null and void. It's
good. Yeah.
Our marriage vows were firmly in place. They were vows before God. They were vows to each other, whether we were doing well or not. And I think that pointed out to me how, and you mentioned it, how close we skate to the edge many times in our relationships. We, rather than saying, as the Bible says, you know what, wow, run from those kind of feelings, put those feelings back into your marriage. Don't entertain that fantasy in your head. So but we think, oh, nothing's going to happen from it. It's just, I'm just daydreaming a little. Yeah. He's so cute. And so we walk like right up to the edge, and then it's like, how close can we get to the edge of messing up before we really realize some of us actually take that one step too far. So when I talk to folks about this, I always say, take those kind of thoughts very seriously. Mm-hmm. They're not innocent. They're not just, they have potential to ruin your life, actually.
Yeah.
And, but then you go, well, it's natural to be attracted to other people. I'm always going to be attracted. I'm always going to think a good-looking guy is a good-looking guy. Yeah. I mean, hello.
I'm a
woman.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm, that's kind of the way we're made. I know that Rick will see other women that he'll think, man, she's pretty. Mm-hmm. But what we have trained ourselves to do is to take that attraction and put it back into our marriage, to let it drive us back into passion for each other. That's awesome. That's a choice.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's it, Kay. I'm realizing as I'm listening to you, it's all about choices you've made, right? Like, it's choices of, like, you could either go here, to the right, to the left, you could pursue, or you don't. And you're always making those choices. Say, no, I'm gonna stay with Rick. I'm gonna trust God, even though it's hard, because a lot of people wouldn't do it. It's hard. I'm out. I'm really attracted. There must be some great chemistry. I'm gonna pursue. How do you? And because I want to segue into your book. I know it sounds so simple, but how do you make those good choices? Because I find all around me, ministry, not church, a lot of us are not making the best choices.
You have to begin with the end in mind in everything. You have to begin with the end in mind. If I want to be, at the end of my life, someone who lived with integrity and love Jesus till he comes for me, then I have to make choices all along the way that will get me to the end in mind. If I want to live till Rick, one of us die, we want to be together till old age or Jesus calls us home, then I have to make choices every single day that lead me to the end that I want in mind.
That's good.
If I want to be a good mother, then I have to make choices every single day to, if the end in mind is this, what will get me there? So if I wanted to have my marriage last through my lifetime, for me, I mean, I can't control Rick's choices and decisions, but for me, the choices and decisions I had to make were, then if I want to be with my husband at the end of our lives, make it to our 60th or 70th, wedding anniversary, then that means that any attraction I have to another man in those years has to be turned around and put back into my marriage. It means I don't let myself be in those places. I don't let my mind go there. It's, to me, the secret of it all is just begin with the end in mind.
That is so good.
What do you want for your life? What do you want to be known as? You want to be known as a loving person? Then every day you have to make choices that lead to that end goal in mind. And too often, because we don't have that in our thoughts, like, what is it that I really want to be? What is the kind of person I want to be? What is it that I want for my life? Because we don't have that clear. So then all the other choices become muddy.
Right.
They're not clear. So, well, if I choose this, it's no big deal. Or if I choose this today, it's no big deal. But you have to think, if I want to be, for instance, if I want to be healthy, if I want my body to be as healthy as it can be through my lifetime so that I can serve Jesus with energy and passion and strength, it means then I have to choose what I eat every day. It means I have to choose how much sleep I get. It means I have to choose whether I exercise. Those are choices that get me to where it is I ultimately want to go. I don't know any other answer.
Yeah, Kay, that's beautiful, because I think for a lot of women, that's really empowering, because it kind of comes back to us and not looking at our circumstances to dictate how we go about life, right? And our relationship with God. I mean, because for you, not only this childhood, assault, molestation, marital conflict, this emotional attachment, depression, losing a child, to suicide, I look at your life and, you have made choices in every one of these, right? To go on, to forgive, to heal, to stick to it and hunker down. And that's really, as woman to woman, so encouraging to hear, because so many of us will bail, will remain victims of circumstances, will be angry at God, and I just want to lay in the fetal position on the floor and go home.
Yeah, and I've done all of that.
Yes.
I've done all of that. There are moments, I mean, I would not pretend that I haven't done that. When I had breast cancer, I struggled so, because I felt like I didn't struggle with why me, because I have an understanding that this is a broken world and stuff happens and it's not going to be right until Jesus comes back. So stuff happens to everybody. So it wasn't the why me, but the timing of it. I had just become an advocate for people living with HIV and AIDS and for orphans. I'd gone to work after being a stay-at-home mom for, all the years I was raising my kids. So it's like this whole new life was opening up ahead of me. And I was so excited and felt sure that God had called me. And then I get breast cancer. And it was like,
really?
Right now? Yeah. I don't get the timing of this. So I struggled with timing, not the why me. But so I think all through my life, there have been those moments of deep struggle with God. After my son died, after he killed himself, my faith was crushed. My faith and my hope was crushed for a while, and I had to rebuild it. But I chose to rebuild it. Yeah. I chose to rebuild it. It's not that you don't have those fetal position moments on the floor or the covers over your head or the thoughts of, I can't do this, God, what you've asked of me is just too hard. I've had that, and I do live that. But at the same time, my end goal is I want to belong to Jesus in a way that I'm really his. Yeah. And to do that means that I have to have a surrendered heart through everything that comes my way. And that's a decision. That's a choice.
Kay, I remember even being in Toronto when, you went through that, with your son. And I remember getting emails and Facebook messages to pray for you and your family. I mean, here we are in Toronto, just outside of Toronto, and we grieved with you and we prayed. I mean, it was amazing how the body of Christ rallies and covers. So I want to say that. I've always wanted to say that too. I get teary because it came up through the feed. Then somebody wrote me because we had you up on 100 Huntley Street and Crossroads. And so we're all praying. And I kind of sat back and said, she may never know. She doesn't know us. But as sisters and brothers here, we were praying for you and Rick and the family. So it was amazing to see that happen.
I don't get tired of hearing that.
Yeah.
Because I know that thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people were praying for us.
Yeah.
And I completely believe that it was the prayers of those thousands of people, you in Toronto and other places, that have given us the strength to rebuild our lives.
Yeah.
And so every single one of those prayers is incredibly meaningful to me. And I will forever be grateful for those who have prayed for us, and we deeply appreciate it.
Kay, it makes sense, as we've just heard your story, why you would write then the book Sacred Privilege. Like, I mean, you as a pastor's wife, but anybody in ministry, anybody who struggles with, acceptance and helping children, and adapting to change and protecting your private life and dealing with criticism and living with integrity, all those things as we're writing, I'm like, that's just not a pastor's wife. That is me in ministry, a life, not even let alone me in ministry on television and on podcasts. That's just a life that these are things that we struggle with. As you wrote this, from the pastor's wife perspective, your hope as people read this, what is your hope? Because there's so much here. There's so much good wisdom from a life well lived and choices well made. What would you say as somebody picks up this book? What's your hope?
Well, I did write it through the lens of pastors' wives, because, as I said, that's really the only life I know, growing up in a pastor's home and then married to a pastor. So that's the life I know. But I wrote it to for the woman who, or they're male pastors, female pastors as well. So for the pastor's spouse, if you're new, maybe I can save you some mistakes. I've been in ministry for 42 years, and maybe something along the line that I've gone through will save you some mistakes and some troubles. To the person who's in the middle, been serving in ministry for 20 years or something, and it's never too late to decide that you want to end well. And so the decisions you can make here in the middle. And then for those who are maybe more, I'm 63, I will minister till Jesus calls us, but we won't always be at Saddleback. At some point we will turn it over to the next generation. And so for people like me at this place to be able to go to look back on life and filter through the good, the bad, and the ugly, and to know that serving Jesus with your whole heart in ministry is a sacred privilege. So it was kind of for the new, the middle, the people more at the lasting stage of that, to just stay the course. Hebrews 12, I sign all my books, all the sacred privilege books, Hebrews 12, 1 and 2, because it's, run with courage, run with endurance, run with perseverance, the particular race that is laid out for you. And when you run that race with your eyes on Jesus, you're going to be able to deal with the criticism, you're going to deal with all the issues of privacy and people wanting to know everything about your life. You're going to be able to live in that fishbowl because you're keeping your eyes on the end of our faith, the goal of our faith, and that's Jesus. So, I think that's what I'd say. It's supposed to be a massive piece of encouragement, 250 pages of encouragement to stay the course, hold on to Jesus, build an eternal perspective that allows you to take in the heartaches and the brokenness and the sorrows that come, life and in ministry. Don't give up. Don't walk away. Live with integrity, because the gospel of Christ is, whether you're in ministry or, a post, you work in a grocery store, or you're a lawyer or a doctor or a school teacher. The point is we all live lives that they need to be lives of integrity. Yeah. Lives that other people can say, oh, that's what it means to be a follower of Christ. I get it. That's what it means to be a follower of Christ. And we all have that responsibility. So that is good. That is good stuff. And as I was reading through it and sort of listing all these different things, this book is really for, like you said, anyone. I think it's great because it's from your perspective as a pastor's wife, but I think anybody can engage with it and pick it up and take it and read and be encouraged. Because, like I said, a lot of us struggle through this. And I think as my takeaway as we wrap this up, okay,
it's choices, but I think just your story has so encouraged me. I mean, I'm kind of in the middle of my ministry. I can't believe I've been doing 2 decades of ministry work and NGO work, but I'm faced every day with these choices, how to be integral, how to not freak out on criticism, because people do all the time. And it's not just about my character, it's about my lipstick, my hair, my laugh.
Absolutely.
All the time versus couldn't you just talk about that amazing thing I said within the scripture? No, you're talking about how my lipstick was too glossy.
I know.
And
I do.
And I think I love that saying of sacred privilege, because I think there are days I'm like, what a privilege for me to be given this work that really God has entrusted to me. And I don't take that lightly. There are moments I'm like, you took like a girl abandoned in an orphanage, and I was adopted by 2 Canadian missionaries, and I'm now here. It astonishes me how God will take that and a situation way back then and bring this orphan girl to this place. So I love this. I'm so thankful that you have the courage to share your story.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share it.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for what God's done in your life and how He has taken your story, and He took you from the miry clay and set your feet on a rock.
Yeah.
And you're a witness and a testimony of that. So thank you, Melinda. Thank you.
Thanks, Kay. And you know what? We'll be continuing to pray for you and Rick and your family and Saddleback, and to you viewers and listeners who are, watching and listening on radio and podcast. Please pick up Kay Warren's new book, Sacred Privilege, Your Life and Ministry as a Pastor's Wife. But like we've just said, it's not just for the pastor's wife. It's for anybody who wants to be encouraged to make good choices and see the sort of end of life in mind. And so thanks again, Kay. Great to have you on the show.
You too. God bless you.
Bye. Okay. Kay, hold on. Stay on. I got to take a picture of you.
Okay.
Because I want to show all the girls, because they were so excited I was interviewing you. All my girlfriends. Hey, thanks for checking out this week's episode of Your Story with Melinda. There's plenty more at faithstrongtoday.com/yourstory. Make sure you subscribe to the show so you never, ever miss an episode.